Alright, well now that we've finished assembling these cylinder heads, as you can see they came out pretty darn good. Everything fit nicely. Now we're going to go ahead and install the piston rings on the pistons. Now as you can see we have our new piston ring set here, and as I open the box you'll notice that there are 3 different piston rings in the box. You have one set which fits the top groove of your piston, the next set which fits, as you can see on your piston here, you have your top groove, your second groove, and your oil ring groove. And next I'm going to show you how to install these right on the piston. They're really easy to do. Some people shy away from doing a job like this, but it's really not that complicated. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these piston rings from the box and keep them in order. Top groove, second groove, and I'll set my oil rings right here in front. You can't really mistake those for anything else. There are directions in the package. Now these piston rings are manufactured in different shapes, which is important while you keep these on the top groove, second groove, and your oil ring. The instructions will show you first groove, second groove, and third groove diagram here tells the different shapes of the piston rings on this little picture right here. Now we're going to inspect our first piston ring here. Some piston rings are actually marked with a dot on top, as you see in the diagram here. That identify our top piston ring. In the diagram, this one shows a little dot on the, actually engrooved on the piston ring, which would indicate the bottom of the inner corner has a bevel grinded into it. Now these are all different kinds of shapes of piston rings. Our particular piston ring we have here doesn't have any bevel to it, which it indicates this ring down here, which is your top piston ring. That's your compression ring. So we know that's the top compression ring. We're going to check out the second ring. This one will have a dot on it, as you can see. This one does have a dot on it, as you can see right here. There's a dot. That means that's the top upper part of the ring. That's the way you'll install it on the piston, with the top showing the dot on top. And that actually does have a bevel on the piston ring, so that indicates the top upward of the ring. And then as for our oil rings are just simply a wire oil grabber, I might call it, with 2 very slender rings that one goes on top and one goes on the bottom of that, which will actually keep oil floating inside that big groove of the piston and lubricating the piston. Alright, well now before we install these piston rings on the piston, I'm going to go ahead and put this piston ring inside the cylinder. We want to double check and make sure these are the correct piston rings. Sometimes people do make mistakes and sell you the wrong part, so I always like to check this because now's the time to find out if it's wrong. Otherwise you'll be installing your piston rings and taking them back off the pistons again, and I know you don't want to do that. So try to square this up. Sometimes you can actually put the piston in topwards first just to push this in a ½ inch. You'll be sure it's square. I'm unable to do that with these particular pistons because they're pop-up pistons and they're going to push it in crooked. But anyway, we got it in here. As you can see the small gap there, I'm going to take my feeler gauge, try to see what our gap is. That's about 20. That's the biggest gauge on my gauge here is 20 thousandths, but it's a barely loose 20 thousandths. Anywhere between 20 to 25 thousandths is acceptable on a rebuild engine. So anyway, we know these are the correct piston rings. A piston ring that would be too big wouldn't even fit in there, and the gaps would touch each other. And if they were too small piston rings, you'd have a giant gap there, which would cause it to consume oil and probably wear out the engine prematurely. But we do have a good fit. So we're going to go ahead and take these rings, go ahead and install them on the pistons, and we'll get this job going here. Okay, well as you can see, I've laid down some newspaper here The most important thing you can do while building your engine is keeping all your parts clean and dust free, because that's just going to only damage your engine. So we want to keep everything clean while we do this job. To install your piston rings, we're going to go ahead, you take your oil expansion ring, put that on the piston here. As you can see, it's just a big coil spring basically. You put it on like that. Remember where your gap is. I like to position the gap of the ring even with the piston pin. Okay, just for reference. We're going to take our top oil ring, which is just a small shim ring, and we're going to slip it on over the top part of this ring. And what I like to do, since we have a gap here, I'm going to put the gap of this ring on this position. I try to keep them 90 degrees away from each other. That way it holds the oil in better. So we know our gap's here, right on the piston pin area. I'm going to turn it, thumb it right there. Just kind of get it stuck in the groove there and walk this thing around. Very easy. It'll go right in. There it is. Put it right in. So we know we have a gap here and we have a gap here. So now we're going to put our next gap here. 90 degrees away from everything. Just walk it around easily. And always try to lift this part up and over so you don't scratch your piston. That's pretty important. You don't want to scratch up your piston. So now that I've got this oil ring installed, it should move freely. You should be able to turn it like that. We already know we have our gaps, so 90 degrees off. There, there, and there. Next we're going to put on our second piston ring. Now you have to find the dot on which indicates the top of your piston ring, which is right here. Same process. We're going to start this little corner of the groove in the piston ring groove. Kind of hold it in with your thumb and just kind of pull on this end very gently and it'll pop right into place. It's already gone in halfway, and just pick this end up. Stretch it easily right over there. There are piston ring pliers you can use that will actually pull these gaps apart, but I've kind of come accustomed to just doing it by hand. Make sure they fit in the groove properly and spin. You don't want them to be bound up and too tight. Got a good fit here. Next we're going to install our top piston ring. Now again, check to see if there's a dot. On these particular rings there's not a dot to indicate the top or the bottom, so you could put it on either way. Go ahead and just start the corner of it in the slot there. Walk it around. It's almost like mounting a tire on a wheel, if you're familiar with that. Start one end on and slide it around. So I'm going to set these rings up the same way I did that oil ring by offsetting your slots. See your gap here? I'm going to set your gap center of the skirt. Okay? That's on the second ring. Push it in so it won't pop out. And then I'm going to spin my piston around and find the gap for my top ring is here. We have a gap here. I'm going to spin it around to the skirt side. So this gap is 90 degrees, or actually 180 degrees away from this gap here. So you want one piston ring gap here, one piston ring gap here. That's going to give you the best compression. So anyway, we have that one done. As you can see, your oil ring's installed, our second ring is installed, and our top ring is installed. I'm going to go ahead and do one more for you so you can follow this process again. Take your oil ring, centerpiece of your oil ring, slide it right in the groove, pop it on. Like I said, I usually line it up with my piston pin. Take your top oil ring, just kind of slide it right in between the little area between the piston and the oil ring on the top. We're just going to walk it around. These go on very, very easy. They're very flimsy. Pop it into place. Once again, our oil ring spring ring is gapped in this position. The ring we just put on, the top oil ring, is gapped in this position. So we're going to be sure to gap this bottom oil ring in 180 degrees away from the top ring gap position, right here where the skirt is. That'll help hold the oil in. Just go ahead and get it started with your thumb right in the little area it goes there, and walk this thing around. Lift this up so it doesn't scratch, and it pops right into place. So really easy. Make sure it spins so there's no hang-ups. I'm going to stop with my gap right there. We're going to take our second ring once again. Look for the dot. The dot goes upward. Get one end of it started in the groove here. You just walk it around gently. Got a nice fit. See there? Again, top compression ring. Check for dots. If there's no dots, it's okay to put it on either way. Go ahead and start it with our thumb in the hole. Walk it around. Pull it across. Got it on. And we're going to position these rings, remember, 180 away from each other on our gap. We'll line up the top groove gap here with the skirt. Turn the piston 180. Line up our second ring groove gap with that one. So you have a piston ring gap here and a piston ring gap here, 180 degrees off. That's going to give you the best compression and help your engine last a good long time. So anyway, that's the way that I install the piston rings on pistons. The next thing we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to put all the main bearings and the crankshaft in the cylinder block. Alright, well, I've got everything here prepared to install the pistons, and there's a few goodies here I want to make you familiar with. First of all is the rod bolt protector, which is just a little plastic sleeve that you install right over the rod bolt. You can see I've got one on here already, and what that does is it protects the crankshaft from getting scratched while you're installing the rod into the piston hole. It'll actually guide it right up over the crankshaft without scratching it. It actually helps to line it up if you're really careful and you eyeball it in there pretty straight. It'll guide it right in. So anyway, make sure you pick up a pair of these at your machine shop when you buy all your parts. They usually will give them to you free. Or you can just use a piece of rubber fuel tubing, will work on there too. I've done that before. Then we have our piston ring compressor. This is a pretty good one, which is a set of different size piston ring clamps that you actually put on the same pliers tool, and it has a lock position, so you just cinch it down tight and it'll hold it on. We've got our connecting rod cap, which I've gone ahead and wiped clean with a dry lint-free cloth. Same thing here before I installed the bearing. We have all our rod bearings here, and if you can see, none of these have an oil hole, so you can't really mix any of these up. They'll go on the top or the bottom, unlike the cylinder block bearings do. So we're going to go ahead and lube these things up, put them in the compressor, and I'll show you how to pop them in the cylinder block. It's great if you have a rubber handled mallet or any kind of a soft material that you can